It's an honor and privilege to be able to share some thoughts with others around the world who believe, as I do, in the power of listening to strengthen relationships and bring about positive change. I'm in awe of the many members of the Global Listening Center who increase our awareness of the importance of listening and inspire us all to become better listeners. Never has the world needed good listeners more than we do today. Sometimes it feels like we're in a listening crisis. It's not unusual to hear stories of conflict, misunderstanding, and disrespect. Headlines draw attention to our desperate need for effective listening. In just one day in the United States, there was a mass shooting in California, a fiery exchange between NBA players, threats aimed at doctors over abortion rights, and teachers intimidated because they refused to remove certain books from library shelves. The anxiety and mental health issues caused by the consequences of poor listening plague millions of families and communities. I think we all recognize that more effective listening could make a significant difference in the world. From facilitating constructive team dynamics, to reducing local conflicts, to fostering openness and respectful dialogue on broader issues like climate change and COVID protocols. A friend of mine suggests that listening plugs you into life. It helps you not only understand others, but also understand yourself. Listening can be, as the Global Listening Center recognizes, transformative. It's our best hope for creating the world we'd like to live in, and I believe every one of us can help to make that happen. As a diverse community of people who care deeply about listening, you are very likely some of the best listeners in the world. I'd like to suggest that that distinction comes with an opportunity to have a significant positive impact on others, to be what I'll refer to as a listening champion. Let me explain how I see that happening. Simply talking about listening, as we all do, and some of us all the time, can feel vague, messy, often overwhelming. I think that's why I've often turned to a behavioral approach to understanding the listening process. There are numerous helpful models, but the one that I developed years ago and called the Hurrier model of listening, it grounds me. It helps me to see things more clearly. The model suggests that most listening behaviors belong to one of 6 broad and interrelated skill areas. The first is hearing, which includes concentrating and paying attention to the right things. When I talk about attention wandering, I think of the well-known comment, "Sometimes I spend the entire meeting wondering how they got that big table through the door." In addition, we need to recognize that not everyone focuses on the same message or the same set of facts, which is why people at the same event often come away with very different stories. Understanding what someone says is the next component. Listeners come to recognize the complexity of language and appreciate that meanings are personal and unique, which makes creating shared meanings a constant challenge. I think a good quote to keep in mind here is something the great jazz musician Miles Davis noted. "If you understood everything I said, you'd be me." Remembering what you've heard makes ideas useful down the road. If you don't keep promises because you can't recall what was said, the perception is that you haven't listened. Memory is an essential component of active listening. If you think about it, what you remember becomes what happened. I use the component of interpreting to capture empathy, which in my opinion is one of the most essential behaviors for bringing people together and building relationships. By listening to the nonverbal elements as well as the words, we demonstrate emotional intelligence and social sensitivity. By projecting warmth and authentic interest, we communicate our support and reduce defensiveness. Evaluating, another component, requires the listener to objectively assess the message content and is a critical skill in today's world. A listener who doesn't remain open-minded or consider alternative points of view might make the comment, "I'm sorry, but if you were right, I'd agree with you." Finally, the listener chooses a response, which is significant because perceptions of the degree to which someone listened are based primarily on the response. Specific skills, then, related to each of these 6 components can be taught and assessed to improve an individual's listening ability. Yet, although I find behavioral models useful, I think it's essential to keep in mind that listening isn't simply a skill. Although a skills approach may be the first step for many of us, listening is qualitatively more than the sum of a few specific behaviors. Those who listen well share an attitude of openness and respect and a commitment to embrace the multiple perspectives that are critical to making the world a better place. But talking a lot about the importance of listening and developing our own personal listening skills, it just hasn't gone far enough to change the nature of the conversations that divide us. While improving personal listening effectiveness is important, a very important first step, I think those who care about listening need to reach out a little further to our families, our organizations, our communities, and become what I call a listening champion. We need to find ways to use what we know about listening to have a positive impact on others. It doesn't matter what your background is, or what position you hold, or what country you live in. What matters is that you take on a shared responsibility to do whatever you can to facilitate effectiveness wherever you can. Listening champions foster inclusiveness and a sense of community. They cultivate a spirit of collaboration and help individuals work towards common goals. Think about the issues and the context you've experienced where a listening champion could have made a difference, from facilitating constructive team dynamic to reducing local conflicts to fostering openness on broader issues like artificial intelligence and gender equality. Let's begin by imagining what the world would look like if we all practiced listening-centered communication. How would that influence conversations, especially on controversial topics? How would it feel to be engaged in non-defensive and respectful dialogue in your daily interactions? Take a minute. Imagine that world of collaboration and respect where everyone is listening, really listening. Now keep that image in mind. Now the challenge is to collectively begin to identify and share specific ways listening champions can foster understanding and inclusiveness, the interventions, actions that would bring us closer to the world we imagined. Identifying and then implementing specific strategies to facilitate listening is an ongoing process. I'm sure you'll discover numerous possibilities, things you can do at your budget meeting tomorrow or a big event next week to have a positive impact on the dynamics that take place. But we need to turn our thoughts into actions. Every one of you, no matter where you live or what you do, are well positioned to take this opportunity to make a difference, not by just listening effectively yourself, but by becoming a catalyst to inspire more effective listening among other participants. I'd like to share some simple ways to get started as a listening champion. I'll begin with 4 examples of practices that I've used to facilitate open and respectful dialogue. While your experiences will differ, I think we can all find ways to foster effective listening within the context of our communities and our cultures. 1, make sure everyone is heard. We need to give those who are quiet a voice, an opportunity to participate and to be recognized. Too many people feel invisible or misunderstood, so they stop talking. Many become depressed or lonely when no one listens. In fact, loneliness has become a public health crisis worldwide. I work with older adults, a group that often feels ignored and disenfranchised. A relevant quote I always use in my leadership class reads, "Leaders who don't listen are eventually surrounded by people who have nothing to say." Listening champions can help prevent that from happening by working to ensure that all voices are heard. 2, encourage others to tell their stories. I heard someone say that the stories we collect define us and are the scaffolding of our realities. While families and organizations have stories that define their culture and bind them together, rivals have narratives that emphasize differences and keep them apart. I believe we have to hear and consider everyone's story. They provide invaluable insights and help us better understand how diverse perspectives and orientations, whether personal, cultural, political, shape the conversations we have. We can then begin to build a common foundation that bridges differences, but capitalizes on the intrinsic value of diversity. 3, diffuse emotions and create a safe space for listening. Carl Rogers recognized so many years ago that things make more sense if you assume that people's behavior is influenced by how they feel. We know that almost any strong emotion interferes with listening. Fear, especially, plays a significant role in explaining behavior. There's a fascinating study, I think I have this right, that Kate Murphy explains in her book. Researchers discover that a specific part of the brain lights up when someone is chased by a bear. Interestingly, that same part of the brain also lights up when someone's beliefs are challenged. Subjects had the same emotional response in a personal dispute as they did when they were chased by a bear. Even college students have reported that conflict often makes them feel afraid. As a listening champion, then, you might work to diffuse emotions by asking non-threatening, relevant questions rather than challenging positions. Creating a safe space for someone to express themselves can go a long way to facilitating listening-centered communication. Finally, approach listening situations with generosity of spirit. Be willing to stand in someone else's shoes and then help others to recognize that there may be multiple truths in the world, that everyone is probably doing their very best to navigate in an uncertain and increasingly complex environment. Our past experiences shape the lens we use to view each new dilemma. It's likely that participants may not even be drawing from the same sources of information. Demonstrating compassion, generosity, and open-mindedness contributes to creating an environment that encourages trust and better listening. In my reimagined world, every person is a listening champion. Each one of us has the potential to influence others, to guide the conversation, to bring out the very best in the people around us. We aren't victims of poor listening. We are role models and catalysts, sometimes I think more than we realize. Every person can make the choice to step up, to be a listening champion. Every one of us has the ability to affect positive change. As we know well, the only behavior over which we really have control is our own. If each of us makes a commitment to take on the role of a listening champion, even in some small way, our collective action will make a difference. But we can't just sit back thinking about what should be done. We need to engage. As a former statesman advised, do what you can with what you have, where you are. The ability to make a difference in the world is within our reach. We just have to listen.